how do you manage the long game when your leadership only cares about quick wins? How do you stand out in a flooded market with over 3,500 vendors? Or support your sales team to follow up when there's nothing really built yet for them to help succeed? These are the real questions that I'm being asked in my DMs this week alone, through my LinkedIn DMs, through my emails. And if you're in sales or go-to-market, you've probably felt this tension. Revenue pressure, crowded markets, enabling teams without the perfect toolkit. I've led go-to-market teams for high growth organizations, build pipeline in saturated markets, and help sales leaders close the gap between strategy and execution. So today I'm going to give you the clear tactical answers straight from the field. By the end of this episode, you're going to know how to balance long-term with short-term revenue pressure if that's you as a salesperson, how to choose those vendors and position yourself clearly, and what to give your sales team right now that will actually help them drive follow-up. So let's get into it. So I've got question 1. How do I manage the long game when leadership only sees short-term wins? The question I got asked specifically around this was your post just now. I did a post based on long-term gain, on looking at the big picture. And she said, your post just now, how do you manage the long-term game? I know that that is the right play with a leader who is looking at the quick wins taking priority. I'm so worried about being a pest and burning bridges with my clients that I've tried to build over the last 18 months, but I need to balance that with immediate revenue expectations. I'd love your input on that, and I'm sure it's not a straight up answer. Now, my take on this is that first remember what is in it for them, or what is pressured or that they're being given. So leaders want quick wins. They want runs on the board. They want to hit the numbers that they have projected or forecasted, because that's what really matters to them. If we think about putting a salesperson in those shoes, is that what salespeople care about is how are they going to hit their number, and how are they going to take home that commission, or how are they going to win that bonus? Everybody has a goal. Everybody's trying to achieve something. And I always remember a sales manager actually used to say to me, every salesperson is coin operated. And they said, always go and find out what drives that other person. What's their target? What are they trying to hit? And I think it's super valuable when it comes to understanding what drives others. So remember, you are the buffer. So if you are in this situation, you're the buffer between the leader and the prospect. And your job is to protect both relationships. Now, you can buy yourself some time. You can be that person that goes in between. And so buying yourself time with your leader, being transparent, and then potentially bending the truth. Now, I'm not saying here that we should lie to our managers. Every sales manager is going to come after me from this. But what I am sharing is that your leader needs to understand where you're at. And the way that they're going to understand where you're at is that, can they trust you? Have you forecasted stuff before and it's not quite gone your way? Have you been able to prove to them that what you're telling them, the conversations that you've had, the projected forecast for that closing, is that true? Like, has that actually happened? Let's build some trust within them. Let's be real on what's expected to close across your pipeline, why it's real, what makes it real, and then what are the touch points that you are going to adhere to ensure that that doesn't slip. When you're not confident in a close date, don't disappear. Lean into it. Find out more about it. Find out what's gone awry. Find out what's changed. And ask, what do they care about right now? Can you share a podcast with them? Can you share a relevant article? Remember, it doesn't always have to be you. And actually, I've chosen another question that I've been asked, which I will answer towards the end of today's episode, around assets and around how do we follow up. If we've done everything we believe we need to do and we've got our really clear next steps in place, articulate that to your leader, to your manager, and explain why you won't be going after them in the meantime. I've seen salespeople be badgered into following up and throwing out discounts and deals when there's actually no point, because even if it was 50% off, they still can't sign off because the person that signs off on it, or the budget's not been allocated, or somebody's away. We have to be really mindful of what's going on. And so if you need to bend the truth slightly or explain what's happening so that they are not going to put any extra pressure on you to do that, then that would be my first port of call. And you probably need a better leader in that position, if that is the case. But what the trick is for you is to engage them outside of the close. So if we need to engage with the prospects that are in the pipeline, engage with them outside of the close. We don't care when you're going to close. We don't care what the process is. I want to engage with you and say, hey, it's been a little while. I know we're tracking towards a November close, whether we want to mention that or not. The reason for my call today today is I saw this. We recently announced this. This just happened and I think it's going to be of relevance. I know when we spoke, you were doing this. This is what I've just heard, or I know that this is of interest. I thought I'd share this with you. So this is where we go about something outside of the close. We almost remove the fact that we care so much about this close date and we work around that to then remain front of mind because we know November is the date. We don't want to be annoying. We don't want to push that. If we're unsure, we ask the questions and we validate it and we move through. Now, meanwhile, so that's within our pipeline. So the question was around how do I hold off basically on having to badger people I've built relationships with? One is we need to make sure it's really clear and concise. Two, we need to make sure we've done everything we can. And if we can't necessarily, go back and recall the opportunity and go in with regards to it closing, then we choose a reason to reconnect outside of that close. And then aside to that, we want to then start building and seeing if we can find some of those quick wins, because they definitely exist. There are, low-hanging fruit. I've seen a lot of posts on that actually this week. Maybe I should do something else on low-hanging fruit, but there is low-hanging fruit to be had for everybody. And if you're going to go out there and shake some trees, you're going to find more opportunity. And this is why the harder we work, the luckier we get, the more calls we make, the more activities we do, the more success we find from it. Okay. So that's definitely going to play a part. So we want to stay on top of opportunities. We want to make our activities forefront. Number one thing that we're focusing on. If our pipeline is healthy and we're happy with where that's at, now let's refocus ourselves back on prospecting. Because if you can show a healthy pipeline with close dates spread across 12 to 18 months and beyond, you'll start to build credibility with your leader, with the organization, and be able to hold your own when it comes through. Now, remember, leaders get skeptical because salespeople overpromise and underdeliver. So we don't want to bluff it. We want to show our work. We want to own our forecast and stay proactive. Be the buffer, be the builder, be honest, but be that person in between. Make sure that what it is you've forecasted is solid, that you've got the data and information to back it up. You've got a clear close date and you are going to prove that you can execute on it. You've qualified enough, you've understood enough. Now let's go back around and let's shake some of those trees. With those activities, you can go back to past opportunities, ones that have gone cold, ones that were a no, that potentially now may be a yes. And we can also go back to replication of ideal clients in that instance. Okay, so let's move in to question 2. How do you cut through the noise when there are 5,000 plus vendors? This was from a recent attendee of the Edge conference, and they said, I recently attended Edge and was gobsmacked by the sheer choice. What feels like 5,000 plus technology service options? How do you decide what to focus on? It's clear you need to be customer outcome driven first, then find the product or service that fits. Now to figure out how to distinguish yourself across 3,500 other MSPs. I had to do a quick Google to get that number because I wasn't sure how many there were across Australia, and to find that there was over 5,000, over 3,500 individual. And I think of that, I'm not sure if I've got the data here, but yes, I found it across 6,000 different products across 150 categories. So if you're an MSP, like, you are fighting for noise, you are fighting to be heard. I've heard this more than once, and this is definitely real. Conferences like Edge are amazing. I was at the IT Nation just recently. There are a lot of, events happening throughout the year and they are awesome, but they can definitely feel overwhelming, especially as a reseller, because your job is to resell all of the different technology and services out there. If you're a vendor, you've only got to think of one. You might have a whole heap of different solutions in that, but essentially still only one story. How do we start? What's our way through it? So we need to start with a foundation. Now, I'm going to share a story of what I did and what I know works. So when I first started in MSP world, I was very much across managed services, network, storage, and a bit of compute, so your laptops, etc. I remember my first entry point into cybersecurity vendors, and that was with Sophos, and they are fantastic. They were fantastic then. They're an awesome organization to deal with still to this day. And it's funny, I have some real soft spots for certain vendors, which you may be picking up during my podcast and and the content that I share. And I think it's a mixture of great people, great technology, and being able to actually have, runs on the board with those vendors where we've been the first to market in WA or the first to market in Australia, or we've closed the biggest deal in the region. So much of that comes, with the territory. So it's great, definitely great to see. So they were crushing it. It was a really great place in the market for Sophos to be. We were doing really well in the client bases that I was working within, and getting results. And so the base was solid. The client demand and the gaps were being fulfilled through this technology. And so we used to get a lot of vendors that would come in and pitch. And I remember one specifically, Palo Alto. Again, love Palo Alto. I think, again, a great technology, a great vendor out there in the market. And I remember they kept knocking on the door. And my question to them, because again, it was early days, so I was able to ask a really, I guess, a naive question, maybe we could say, but be really upfront with the questions I was asking, which was like, why? Like, how are you different to Sophos? Like, how am I going to be able to bring and be authentic and bring my knowledge and capability to my clients whilst pitching two different solutions, which to me was like, they both do cybersecurity. And again, it was very early days in my career, and I couldn't really justify the overlap in those early days. Now that could be down to, again, I don't remember the specifics. It could have been down to the fact that the way it was being positioned, maybe they were trying to displace Sophos. For me, in the end, it was eventually we found a right fit because timing was right. We found clients that needed a bit more than Sophos, or we had clients where they wanted options, or where we found that they already had Palo Alto included. We were very clear on who we went to market with and who we backed each time. So that was really important. The best additions that we found outside of that would come from the way that clients approached us. It was very rare that it would be like, we've got this product or this vendor coming in. And I know a lot of distributors do a fantastic job of taking to market the vendors. I know the vendors do a fantastic job. I was actually just on a call earlier today with a new reseller and integrator, and they're looking at their niche position in the market, which is very exciting. And we're working with them over the next 6 months to help them bring themselves to market. And, one of the questions was, who should we be working with outside of these key vendors and who plays nicely with them? And it's a really great question to ask because you want to know, does A play with B, play with C? And if you can find some affiliation across the three, it's going to be a great decision to be made. If you can go out and speak to your ideal audience, what do they want? What do they need? Who is everybody talking about? And how do you differentiate yourself in that market and stand out from the crowd? If you're selling the same thing that everybody else is selling, you are going to become a commodity. It's going to be really hard to stand out from the noise. And so for us back then, what I found worked really well. Our clients would ask for something specific. They would talk about, they would talk about a new technology, or I'd go along to a conference and hear about a new vendor coming into Australia. And over time, the vendors started coming to me, which was a fantastic position to be in. I would get phone calls directly. I know a couple of people said, apparently you're the person to speak to for WA. And again, WA was a fairly small market. We didn't really have reps on the ground then. And so it was very much led by the resellers and integrators. And those already in the market were doing a lot of Cisco, a lot of Microsoft, again, a lot of what everybody already had in town. And that's not to say that they're not good enough, but you've got to pique the interest. You've got to find something that gets people excited if you want to have a new reason to reach out and engage, because it's going to be very hard to displace HP solution provider with another HP solution provider, because essentially the outcomes are going to be the same. Same thing with managed services. If you are offering the same level of managed services as somebody else, the only time you're going to do that is if they drop the ball, or if something awful happens, then they may come to you and consider it. But moving is going to be a really big shift. So as I mentioned, vendors started coming to me. That's how I became one of the top reseller reps for Netscope, Tenable, CyberArk. All came from word of mouth, came from a great reputation in the market, distributors knowing, who to go to, because at the end of the day, path of least resistance, people want to sell. These leaders within these vendors, they want to sell. The resellers, me, I want to sell. So for me, it was about, how do I connect the dots? How do I find solutions and technology that I believed in, that I believed I could take to market, that I knew my clients would benefit from? For me, where would I start? I would start with one or two solutions, looking at ones that your competitors aren't necessarily pushing launching, and go deep with those. Look at how do you get backing? How are you going to mean something to them? Use the 80-20 rule. What 20% of vendors are driving 80% of your revenue? Double down on those vendors and cut back on the others. Who's giving you MDF? Who's supporting you going to market? Who's helping you with some of those blitz sessions? Drive it with them. Who's giving you the best feedback in the market? What clients are raving about the vendors and technologies you're using? Take that, go somewhere else. Take it on repeat. Replicate your ideal clients, replicate your outcomes that you can drive, and choose your partners to go into battle with. And if you're unsure, go chat with some vendors, go chat to distributors. They're the ones delivering the information. I know some of the great players across the market are going out all the time to meet with resellers and integrators to share, certain subsets of vendors that will really have an impact for them and their clients as well. Okay, so into our third and final question for the podcast. Question 3, what should I give my sales team to help them follow up? Now, this was from a go-to-market leader, and the question they asked was, what's typically shared with the sales team to support follow-up? We don't have anything that we use currently, and we want to start somewhere. So my take on this comes back, as I mentioned, to question 1 that I shared. If you're trying to stay top of mind without being a pest, without being annoying, using value-led follow-up assets are going to be your best friend. We're building on this now with a client and a fractional CMO, and we've landed on 3 foundational assets that I'm going to share with you. So a quick overview brochure is great. Now, something I do find is a lot of businesses love a capability statement or a brochure overview, and they put everything into that. And then we go to market, we have some conversations, and it really limits us to, awesome, do you have something to share? And we're like, yeah, we've got this brochure, it's 7 pages. You have to read through it to find what you need. And that's not really what we should be sharing. So when we think of an overview brochure, what do you do? Why does it matter? Do you have some social proof you can put in? A couple of quotes, some stats, some backing or buy-in from the vendor or the partners, depending on who you are working with. And so this overview brochure should give you insights and information, or give your prospects insights and information where they can make decisions or get a handle on what it is that you do and how you deliver it. Now, asset number 2 is a deep dive case study. Now, structured around the problem is going to give that problem statement. It's going to give, what were they in your inbox? What were they in your meeting for? The solution, followed by the outcome with language, the specific language from the client. Now, yes, I say specific language a lot because it's so important that we weave that through the conversations. So if we're going to use that deep dive, we could have a couple of case studies in there, but having one that really resonates with the market you're going after. If you've got 2 or 3 different variables, consider building those out or having a use case added into some of those case studies at the beginning whilst you're building those out. And then the third one that we are using with our client is a useful asset. So I always suggest, think of something that solves 10% of the problem. Is it something they can use right now to get a result to solve that 10%? Could it be a checklist, an ROI calculator, a calculator of some sort, or a self-assessment tool? It's really going to help them solve partial problem and build some trust so that we can build some momentum around the conversations that we are going to be having. We've got clients that have got so many different ranges of collateral and assets, and I always love skimming through and seeing what's in there. We've got one of our clients that's got about 50 pieces plus of collateral. It's insane. It's so good. It's video, it's podcast, it's self-assessments, it's ebooks, it's guides, it's reports, you name it. They've got absolutely everything. And we actually run lead development as a service for them. And the great thing for us when we're doing that is that we can tailor every piece of collateral to the conversation that we're having. So that's the dream state. We don't have to start there. We start with 3 ideal pieces. They started with 3. The clients we're working with are starting with 3, and you can absolutely do the same. So I would say, think about something that explains who you are, something that tells a story, and then something that helps them win. So those 3 things are going to help you drive the collateral that you need to create. And I always ask, what do I want them to walk away with from this document, from this asset, or from this piece of information that I'm going to share with them? Now, as I mentioned, these weren't random questions. They came from people in the field navigating real problems. If you're facing pressure from above, saturation of the market, and friction in your sales process, remember you are not alone. The answers aren't always flashy. They're practical, they work, and they'll compound over time. So remember to stay consistent. Lead with value always. Build the pipeline that you want to see over the next 12 to 18 months. Don't focus on today or tomorrow. Think big picture. It's going to help you evolve and drive opportunities as you build out your pipeline. It builds trust for both you and yourself as to can you do this, but also internally and externally. It reduces the stress factor. It allows you to focus on these big picture, big view opportunities, and it will help you drive momentum and more revenue and more commission back to you as well. I hope you've enjoyed the Q&A that I've shared with you today in the episode. As you know, we're here every week. Make sure you like and subscribe and maybe share this with somebody. You never know who may need to hear exactly this to help them drive their opportunity next week.